State lawmakers propose fingerprinting, more background checks on gun purchases after Aurora warehouse shooting. Nearly 2 months after a gunman opened fire in an Aurora warehouse, Illinois lawmakers are proposing changes to the state's gun licensing laws intended to make it harder for people barred from owning firearms to get guns. Among the changes proposed are requiring fingerprints as part of gun license applications and background checks on all gun purchases. The proposal also seeks to strengthen efforts to remove firearms from people whose firearm owners' identification cards have been revoked, supporters said Tuesday. Illinois gun license laws have become a flashpoint in the nearly 2 months since the Aurora shooting. The proposal, unveiled at a news conference Tuesday at the Thompson Center in Chicago, is intended to address what advocates called loopholes in the state's gun license laws. It seeks to address issues prevalent in the Aurora warehouse shooting, a November shooting at Chicago's Mercy Hospital where gunmen killed 2 hospital employees and a police officer, and other gun violence, advocates said. Gun violence in Illinois is a public health crisis, said Kathleen Senses, president of the Gun Violence Prevention PAC, which is sponsoring the proposal. It happens in the city, it happens in the suburbs, and we need to fix it now. Among the proposed changes are required background checks for all gun sales, including those by private seller, reducing the length of a valid gun license from 10 years to 5 and allowing Illinois State Police to deny a concealed carry license if it deems the applicant poses a significant danger of causing bodily injury to himself, herself or another person in the near future by possessing a concealed firearm. The legislation would require applicants for a gun license to apply in person with the state police and submit fingerprints as part of their application. If a person whose firearm owner ID card has been revoked fails to turn over their guns to local law enforcement and complete the required paperwork, the proposal would require the state police to seek a search warrant to retrieve the weapons. State Representative Kathleen Willis, the North Lake Democrat who sponsored the measure, said the proposal arose out of a conversation about the ways the Aurora warehouse gunman was able to get and keep the gun he used to kill 5 fellow Henry Pratt Company employees and wound 5 Aurora police officers. Aurora Democrat Barbara Hernandez is also among the measure's supporters. The Aurora gunman's criminal background should have prevented him from purchasing the gun used in the shooting, but he was issued a gun license in 2014 after a background check using 5 federal databases failed to show a mid-1990s felony conviction for aggravated assault in Mississippi. He did not submit fingerprints as part of his FOID application but chose to submit them later that year to expedite his application for a concealed carry license. Those fingerprints flagged his prior conviction. State police denied his concealed carry license and sent him a letter informing him his gun license had been revoked. He should have turned over his gun and provided a written account of his firearms to local law enforcement, but instead kept the gun for 5 years until he opened fire in February inside Henry Pratt. Willis said the fingerprint requirement in her proposal is intended to safeguard against applicants who might lie about their criminal history on an application, as state police have said the Aurora shooter did, and make sure an applicant's criminal record shows up no matter the name it is listed under. The proposal to require gun license applicants to apply in person is also intended to safeguard against lying, she said. Willis said additional costs to get a gun license are intended to help provide funding for law officers to enforce gun license revocations. She is working with state authorities on additional ways to make it more manageable for them to enforce FOID card revocations, she said. Key to the proposal, she said, are background checks on all gun sales. If we can have better checks at the front end, that's a few thousand people that wouldn't even get a FOID card, so that's a revocation we don't have to do down the line, she said. Daniel Webster, director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Policy and Research and one of the authors of a recent report on Illinois gun violence, called Illinois gun license laws one of perhaps the weakest systems. The gun license proposals, in particular, the requirement that applicants go in person and provide fingerprints, could keep guns out of the hands of criminals, he said. In states that have the most rigorous systems for licensing those who purchase firearms, particularly handguns, we see remarkable consistency in reductions in diversions of guns for criminal use through things such as straw purchases, he said. Richard Pearson, executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association, blasted the proposal, calling it a crazy bill. The costs for various parts of the application process and the requirement to apply in person with the state police for a gun license would be prohibitive to many, he said. The state police shouldn't have the authority to determine if a person is a danger to themselves or others, and not everyone who has their FOID card revoked is a violent offender who deserves to have their door kicked in by authorities who have gotten a search warrant if they fail to turn in their guns within 48 hours, he said. This has to be the worst bill I have ever seen in my entire life, Pearson said. The proposal was met with support from some law enforcement officials, including Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson. Johnson said background checks for private gun sales would help the Chicago Police Department better track illegal gun purchases, which he called a primary contributor to Chicago gun violence. Universal background checks and giving the Illinois State Police the resources to enforce FOID card revocations will likely help ensure people turn over their weapons when they lose their gun licenses, he said. Lake County Sheriff John Eidelberg said in a statement the Aurora shooting exposed weaknesses in the state's gun license laws, and he supported efforts to close those loopholes. I respect the constitutional right of being able to bear arms, he said. But to reduce the likelihood of tragedy, we must keep guns out of the hands of violent felons or those suffering a mental health crisis,